Hello learners, how are you? This is teacher Druscilla Nangoma once again. I'm going to take you through a geography lesson. The senior fives quickly join me. I want us to look at the types of lakes and how they were formed. So today's lesson is on lakes. So I want us to define what is a lake. I want us to describe what is a lake. Now, by definition, a lake is a collection of water in a hollow. That is what a lake is on the earth's surface. Now, before we start to define, or before I proceed, I want us to have objectives of today's lesson, such that by the end of this lesson, after you've watched this video, you must be in position to define a lake. You must be able to describe for me the lakes that are formed as a result of faulting. And then you should be able to write down for me the different types of lakes in East Africa especially. So let's go ahead and define a lake. A lake, I've already said that it is a hollow, a body of water occupying a hollow or a depression on the earth's surface. So how are they formed? How does this depression get filled with water? This water comes from rain. It can come from a hot spring. It can come from a river. So it accumulates in such depressions, and then that is what we call a lake. In East Africa, we are glad we have so many lakes. And these lakes, these depressions don't just exist, but they are formed through a number of denudation processes. When I talk of denudation processes, these are processes that expose the land surface. These are processes that expose the land surface. They can cause an alteration. So when I talk of those, I mean processes like faulting. I'm talking of processes like downwarping, volcanicity, erosion, glaciation, and deposition. You realize that all these processes can change, can alter the initial appearance of the landscape. So when all these processes work on the Earth's surface, we can have those depressions created, and then later these depressions are filled with water to form lakes. So what are the different types of lakes in East Africa? When I talk of lakes in East Africa, I can look at tilt or Rift Valley lakes. Those are the ones we are calling our graben lakes. Okay. We can have the downwarped lakes. The most example you know is that of Lake Victoria. And so then you can talk of the crater lakes. Usually these are found on top of the volcanic mountains. Then we have the lava dammed lakes. We have the lava dammed lakes. Those ones form when lava flows from a volcano and it is near a river. So the magma flows down and it blocks the river, and therefore that river forms a lake. Then we have the glacial or the turn lakes. The turn lakes form on a mountainside because ice is going to erode the mountain sides, and then it creates circular depressions, the ones we are calling turns, and those depressions are filled with water to form a lake. Then we have oxbow lakes. Oxbow lakes, what are they? How are they formed? Okay, so we'll proceed and look at the lagoons. We look at the lagoons and then the moraine lakes. All those have something to do with glaciation. That is why we are looking at them as moraine or moraine dammed lakes. So those are the different types of lakes. Now your concern or your task here is to identify how many lakes do we have in East Africa and which lake was formed by what process. So today I want us to look at one type of lakes, and that is the tilt or the graben or the Rift Valley lakes. So we are going to look at that as our topic for today. So when I talk of lakes formed by faulting, I want us to be able to define. I think we can remember what is faulting. Okay, after we have defined faulting, how does it come about, and then how do lakes come as a result of faulting? Senior fives, we have looked at faulting before, and if I'm to define faulting based on what you studied earlier, faulting is the fracturing or altering or displacement of rocks. Now, how does that process happen? That process can take place or can happen as a result of tectonic movements within the interior of the Earth's surface. So, these movements are caused by convective or geothermal processes. These are the ones that are going to result into mounting of pressure on the Earth's surface. And when that pressure is exposed or worked onto the Earth's surface, it's going to alter the nature of the Earth's surface, creating what we call fault lines. Okay, then those fault lines are going to create a change, either subsidence or uplift of the blocks of the Earth's surface. We shall look at that in detail. So when I talk of tilt or blockma rivers, Rift Valley lakes, I'm looking at the graben lakes formed as a result of secondary faulting on the floor of the Rift Valley. So when they ask you to describe the formation of a Rift Valley lake, you need to take note of the fact that we're talking about secondary faulting, meaning the initial faulting happened, but then this same area that was worked upon by either tension forces or compression forces is further exposed to those same forces, that same area of the Earth, that same block. Then it is further faulted on. That is what we are calling secondary faulting. So the floor of the Rift Valley gets deeper, and that deepened depression is later filled with water, which we are going to call our Rift Valley lake. So let's see what I'm trying to talk about. If, for example, this is my Earth surface and it is subjected to tensional forces, you see, tensional forces are going to cause, we are having the Earth surface exposed to forces that are pulling away from it. So what happens is that when the Earth crust is subjected to tensional forces, okay, the Earth's surface is going to get weak. It is because it is like pulling a rubber band. Before you know it, the layers get weak. And as the layers get weak, okay, we can have fault lines created. It's like when you have a very big piece of rock and then you hammer it. But the moment you expose it to pressure, or you are attach pressure to it, it is going to get weak. It's going to start crumbling, but it just does not crumble. It just it first gets weak. Its cohesiveness is reduced by the pressure you put on it. That is what exactly happens to the Earth's surface when it is exposed to either tension or compression forces. So this layer of the Earth's surface develops what we call fault lines. Those lines of weaknesses, the cracks. And when it is exposed, or when it has become vulnerable, or when those normal faults are formed, either if it is compression forces working on it, the sides are going to either subside or sink, or they are going to get uplifted. Meaning the middle block where the fault lines were formed is going to sink. Are we together? So the compression forces have created normal faults in the middle of the Earth's surface. These normal faults are going to continue getting weaker, and the middle block is going to sink. When it sinks, we're having an uplift of the side blocks. Okay? So the sinking of the middle block is what creates a rift valley. However, if this same middle block is further exposed to tension or compressional forces, it is further going to sink. And when it sinks, we create what we are having as secondary faults. More lines of weakness are created on the already sunk depression. So we end up having a depression that is wide and deep, and this depression is later filled with water, and that is what we call a graben lake. I think you have understood. Thank you so much. So in this picture we see an earlier sinking of the middle block. Okay, then further we see more sinking going on, that is more secondary faulting. So what happens in the end is a huge graben or a big depression, and that depression is what we shall refer to as our rift valley. If it is filled with water, we call it a rift valley lake. Some of the rift valley lakes, now what I'm talking about is this. Initial faulting takes place. I think you can see the fault lines. Then more faulting takes place on that same block. Then we see more faulting happening, deepening the rift valley flow further. That rift valley flow is going to be filled with water. Okay, and that water is the one that we are going to call a rift valley lake. Okay, thank you. So our task is going to be on the types of lakes or rift valley lakes in East Africa. In Uganda we basically have 4. Okay, we have Lake Albert. I think we can see all these ones in the western arm of the Rift Valley. We have Lake Albert, we have Lake George, we have Lake Edward, and Lake Choga. These, if you're to realize, are deep lakes. Okay, some are alkaline. That is why when you look at Lake Bunyonyi, we have salt crystals in it. Then in Tanzania we have Lake Rukwa, Lake Tanganyika, Malawi, and Manyara. Whereas in Kenya we have Lake Baringo, Lake Elementaita, Lake Naivasha, Lake Magadi, Lake Turkana. If you're to follow the Rift Valley flow or the stretch of the Rift Valley, you can see these lakes clearly. Okay, so what I'm going to task you to do is to go back home and describe the formation of any one lake found within the Rift Valley. It can be Lake Choga. Talk about which mountains were uplifted and how did the Rift Valley come about. Okay, then after you have done that, submit your work on our Google classroom. The code is I56SIF. After which, don't forget that after watching this video, kindly subscribe by clicking on the button on your right. Go to YouTube, look out for Christian School Owners Association, watch the video, then at the end of the video, click onto the right button to subscribe. Otherwise, it's been nice teaching you, my people. Have a beautiful day. May the good Lord bless you. Submit your work. We meet in the next lesson. Thank you so much.